Hello, difference maker, and welcome to IDD Leader, the podcast that's all about helping IDD providers retain and grow their DSP workforce using behavioral science. I'm your host, Nate Beers. Let's dive in. I was in a session with a client when my phone started buzzing. I looked at the caller ID, and yeah, I recognized it. This can't be good, I thought to myself. I answered the call as I stepped away, and I was just standing in a room staring at a blank wall. I was quickly recalling the last time I'd heard from this service provider. You see, at the time, I was providing behavior supports to a client who was attending their community-based program. And just recently, his historically challenging behaviors had started resurfacing again. I heard her voice over the phone explain, "Nate, I just wanted to let you know that Scott had another behavioral incident today, and we're going to have to discharge him." She went on and explained that he'd run out of second chances, and truthfully, I really understood where she was coming from, and so in the moment, I thanked her for letting me know. When I hung up, I felt in some ways like I'd failed him. How could this have happened? I just trained the new staff on the behavioral interventions. I was telling myself these things. But then the more I thought about it, here's what Scott, and of course that's not his real name, but here's what Scott had experienced over the past 9 months prior to that phone call. All but 2 of his direct care staff at that program had turned over. Some of them had the same position, had multiple staff, multiple turnover in those 9 months. Not only that, but about a month before the call, the program manager left abruptly. Yes, whether coincidence or not, that is around the same time his behaviors had started coming back again. And then to top it all off, he'd gone through not 2, not 3, but 4 supports coordinators during those 9 months as well. You see, difference maker, this is the people cost of staff turnover. He lost all momentum that he would have had with any familiar staff, and instead he reverted back to, well, what he had known before with these challenging behaviors. And I honestly believe, even to this day, if it hadn't been for all that staff turnover, he might very well still be enjoying himself at that program. Today, in this episode, I'm going to mix things up a little bit. Think of this almost like a chat over coffee. I'm going to share with you and talk about various resources. These will hopefully help you out if you're trying to learn more about DSP retention in general, but then especially if you're trying to find out resources to help you solve that problem at your agency. And truly, it's for all the Scotts that are out there. And really for the strength and stability of your organization. For all of that, it's imperative that you level up your staff retention. And I want to help you do that. I have way too many tabs open on my internet browser. And yes, we still only offer an audio version. At some point, maybe we'll do video for these podcasts as well. And that would probably be helpful for today. But get ready for some alphabet soup as I tell you about some different resources. Let's start with CQL. And you have to be patient with me as I have to click through some of these to get to exactly what I'm trying to tell you about. So CQL, that's the Council on Quality and Leadership. Probably you already have heard of them. They have started creating a bank's probably too strong a word, but they're writing articles now for, I don't know if it's 5-6 years, somewhere around that, where they highlight 5-6 different agencies or organizations that are doing things to help their DSP workforce. These could be different programs that the providers have started, different initiatives that have been launched. And really, in their own words, it says this campaign was established so other organizations can then use that information, the information about what's involved, the action steps, hurdles that these organizations have encountered. And then they're hoping that you can use it to implement similar initiatives. So you can easily find them by Googling CQL. They are a very helpful resource in a lot of ways. They talk about some of the same things that I've been talking about in recent episodes, but in case you're just joining us, you wouldn't know those episodes. Everything from how career ladders have worked to, involving feedback and growth for DSPs with a staff development initiative That was with an agency in New York City. There's a Success Coach program at Heritage Christian Services. I believe that one's in upstate New York. Creating Community and Sparking Action. That's with a group called Welcome House. There's just a lot of great different organizations they highlight. In fact, about 2 years ago, I was reading one of these articles, and I was so impacted by what I was reading that I reached out to the author, and she worked and was the executive director at another provider multiple states away, and she graced me with an interview. I was so thankful that she did. So I got to ask her all kinds of questions to get the inside scoop on how they had lowered their turnover, and it was just really quite helpful. So sometimes we can just be a little bit in our own bubbles, a little bit of what the needs at our organization may be so much at the forefront of our minds that we don't know what other organizations are doing, or we're not maybe regularly reminded of that. If that's you at all, then I would highly recommend checking out CQL. You will find what other organizations are doing, and that could be quite helpful. Okay, next up, NADSP. Let's check this one out. So I want to make sure I don't say this wrong. NADSP stands for, is it Alliance or Association? Actually, look at that. I cannot find it right at the top of their webpage. That's hilarious. Okay, this is the National Association or organization. The jury's still out on that one. But they are there we go, Alliance. Oh, there we go, National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. What they do is they're really big into advocacy work. That's probably the number one thing that they do is advocacy. They've been working to get, and I'll probably butcher the details on this, but to get a classification with the Bureau of Labor and Statistics for DSPs, because right now there's not any like official nationwide tracking of it at like the federal level. And so they've been working hard to get that. There has been some forward motion, I believe. I had read some updates on that within the last year, that legislation was in the process of moving forward. I have not seen a status update lately. But how I've often encountered them or known about them actually has to do with their certification process. They offer certification of levels for DSPs, DSP 1, DSP 2, DSP 3, through an e-badge academy. Many organizations have just started implementing this so far from anyone that I've either talked to directly or read about, it's having great results of getting DSPs to essentially it's kind of creating a career ladder. Now, it works best if the agency will give a pay bump as their DSPs go through the credentialing process to get their DSP 1, DSP 2, DSP 3 certs. However, the learning and the buy-in that happens through this process is really valuable even without the pay bump. But of course, I super recommend having a pay bump as well. And I think most organizations are doing it that way, where they're up in the hourly wage by at least just a little bit. They're actually not the easiest thing to get through, which is good. We want that. We want a certification that means something. This isn't just that you stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night and so now you're in the operating room pretending to be a doctor. No, this means something. You're really doing your job as a DSP probably in order to get these certifications. At least that's what it's trying to accomplish. And then anecdotally, the retention rate is really high for DSPs that go through the process. Why? Because they're making a career out of it. I mean, there's just a huge, huge benefit to having people not only to just feel valued with staff appreciation efforts, but also to create that runway, a career runway for individuals that are in this field. The one other thing I want to mention that NADSP has is they have a curriculum. I'm pulling it up right now. It is a curriculum. Actually, they have a few curriculums. Let me try to not butcher this one either. They've got a code of ethics curriculum. That's really cool, helping everybody do their jobs more ethically. They've got a DSP onboarding curriculum and a frontline supervisor curriculum. I think that they are spot on with identifying those as two crucial areas for having a really great employee experience as a DSP is you need a great onboarding and you need a great supervisor. And so how can we do that? Well, when organizations address their onboarding to make that a fantastic experience for new staff, it helps people enjoy working there much more. And when frontline supervisors are equipped with all the tools that they need and the skills, developing those skills, then it also makes for a great experience, makes people want to stick around in their jobs. So there's a quick little rundown on some things with the NADSP. Hopefully one day we'll get either someone from CQL or NADSP on this show, along with the other ones I'm about to mention. The ARC, you've almost for sure heard of all of these so far. Nothing new. There is a surprise coming later that I don't think you'll have heard of. But the ARC, you know about the ARC probably. They are providing advocacy at the national level. There are oftentimes the ARC, there's local chapters that are providing the services directly where they have their own DSP workforce and things like that. But they are something to check out. I have not found quite as many resources in their scope of their focus is more on that advocacy piece than on the training piece from what I've found so far. I could be wrong on that. Now that I've said it, you probably could prove me wrong. But certainly something to check out is the ARC. I love following them on social as well because they are always putting out some neat stuff on social. Ancor, A-N-C-O-R, they put out the next two kind of have some similar reporting. They've put out, I think they've done this a couple times, but the State of America's Direct Support Workforce Crisis 2024. They just put this out recently. And let's see. Oh, here we go. 5th consecutive year. They've conducted a survey. Some of their key findings, I'll just read a few right directly off their webpage. Oh, and a lot of times in the show notes, I'm not putting a lot of detailed information. This time I will try to put at the very minimum, all the website links of where I'm looking at so that if you want to go and check it out, you can on the show notes. But some of the findings include 90% of experienced moderate or severe staffing challenges. These are providers. 90% experienced moderate or severe staffing challenges in the past year. 69% reported turning away new referrals. Wow, that means there's just so many more individuals seeking services. And then check this one out. 39% were discontinuing programs or services. Wow, that to me is a very sobering statistic. And I've seen that locally here in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. And I know if you've been in this field for any length of time, I'm sure you've experienced that too, where you've had peers or colleagues or other providers in your area that have had to close their doors or close doors on some of their programming. Hopefully that's not you. But yeah, it's a sad reality that solving the workforce crisis is part of the solution, certainly not all of it, but a huge part of it. Okay, so that's something that Ancor does. They do a lot of other things too, but that was really all I wanted to highlight as it relates to the main thing I wanted to highlight as it relates to today's episode. They also do some advocacy, and they offer different kinds of trainings, a national conference or convention, things like this. Okay. Let's go to the next one. We've got the National Core Indicators, NCI. You may have heard of them. They've also got a very well-known and well-publicized state of the workforce. The most recent one that is listed at the time of this recording is the survey year 2023. And there are, I've looked through this at length. One of the things I love about it is they have some state-by-state data to check out, and they list so much of the data. One thing that's encouraging to me is that in the midst of having the crazy inflation that happened the last couple of years, which of course has slowed down a bit now, but the wages from 2022 to 2023 the median wage, hourly wage, did go up by $1.22 across the nation, which I'm very thankful to hear that. However, as they highlight, there is still a very high percentage of turnover. I'm looking for the infographic right now. I believe it was at 41% was the national average. I'm looking at some different infographics right now. I don't actually see that percentage. The Yeah, I don't see that one off the top here. But the national average on turnover was still at like a whopping 41%. And a lot of agencies, that varies tremendously from agency to agency. So some are seeing such higher. I mean, some are over 100% turnover, which there's hope. If that's you, there is hope. There are things you can do to help turn that around where it's not going to keep happening at that level. There we go. I did find the graphic now, 40%. Boom. There it is. Okay. Let me talk about the next one. The National Leadership Consortium on Developmental Disabilities. They one of their signature offering is leadership institutes. They've got like these week-long institutes, virtual institutes, where they're pulling together the executives of different provider organizations and really just trying to help strengthen kind of top to bottom every aspect of the organization. They're looking at effective and sustainable organizational practices. This is straight off their website. Helping emerging leaders gain knowledge, skills, resources, and values. They mix it up with lectures, discussions, interactive activities, personal assessments, and skill building sessions. And then they also do offer some executive coaching. They are well networked with a lot of the big names that I just mentioned as well. And so they're kind of tackling it from a leadership perspective, which it was kind of ironic because not long ago I was talking about developing a leadership pipeline and how that was a crucial element of an organization where I have been coaching them, and they had just really had dramatic drop in their turnover from the high 30% down to 20% turnover, and they did that change all in 1 year. I mean, it happened in 1 year. I do think there were some choices in the years prior leading up to it that contributed as well. Anyhow, I was talking about and sharing about how that organization started taking more active steps towards a leadership pipeline. And I recently read an article by some of the folks at the National Leadership Consortium, and that's exactly what they were talking about, is kind of this challenge of, well, do you promote from within but not without the right skills? That can work, but there's some issues. Or do you hire from outside? And there's some great things with that, but there's some liabilities with that. And then they also were suggesting about developing leaders from the inside. So they're a cool organization as well, and hopefully you've already heard of them and know about them. Now, here's for the surprise. You ready for the surprise? The Good Jobs Institute, or maybe just be called Good Jobs Institute. You may or may not have heard of them before, but I'm thinking there's a decent chance you haven't. This was founded, I believe, or at least the face of this organization is a professor at MIT School of Business. And interestingly enough, a lot of her work has been with big retailers, but she lays out through several books, they do trainings for different leaders, how using effective, kind of creating this virtuous cycle that she describes, how it has dramatically turned around the results both financially and people-wise at these for-profit businesses. And it's ranged not just in retail, but also even seeing this at call centers and a number of other types of organizations. And that when there's this investment in people, then operationally they focus and simplify, they standardize and empower, they cross-train their staff, and they operate with some slack. And that in doing so, there's often a tremendous amount of savings financially, and then the quality of the work, the metrics of the quality outcomes and different things that are being measured for the individuals. In our case, the individuals being served, or some businesses, of course, it's like sales, things like that. But it affects the bottom line. That's the bottom line of what I'm trying to tell you, is it affects the bottom line. And I've witnessed this firsthand. And I'm a big fan of Good Jobs Institute and all the different resources they have. They've got some video trainings, like I said, books. They may also offer some consulting as well. I'm not quite as up on everything that they offer. But yeah, that's the Good Jobs Institute. And then the last thing to say is that if you're looking for resources, look around you locally. I'm sure there's somebody, and maybe it's you. Maybe it's you and your organization that is being innovative, but you're going to find innovative IDD providers alongside yourself. You're not alone in that. And just by starting the conversation, whether it's at different statewide events or webinars, if you're going to something that's, maybe it's nationwide, some kind of webinar, but just that networking and asking around, what are other organizations doing? There is so much learning to be had. And I'm a big proponent, big believer that the more that we can learn from each other and work together, the more that everybody's going to win. And so there you go. That would be the last resource, if you can even call it that, is find your own resource. Okay. Well, actually, technically, I do have one more resource. I'm going to call this the action step for today. Would be, I try to always give you one practical step that you can take. I guess I'm trying to be a resource. So here we go. Download my top 10 questions to help you solve DSP turnover. It's a free PDF. You can find it at the following web address, iddleader.com/top10, TOPTEN. So the number 10 is spelled out. That's it's what is it, 6 or 7 pages. It's not overwhelming. It just lays out, these are the kinds of questions that come up over and over again as organizations are seeking to figure out how can we solve this turnover problem. And it just starts to point in the right direction on 10 different key issues. And I'd love for that to be yours so that it can just help you out. And we will keep coming back with episode after episode to empower you to retain your staff. Difference Maker, if you found this podcast helpful, would you consider sharing it? Hit that button of share and send it to someone that you know. Send it to a colleague at your own organization, or send it to someone that you know at some other partner organization. Don't send it to your enemies. It might help them succeed. But yeah, the other thing you could do is, that was a joke, by the way. The other thing you could do is just rate or review this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to it. And that just helps other people find it. That helps it show up on search algorithms. Woohoo. Well, until next time, here's to you, Difference Maker. Keep up the amazing work.